right, hey everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Like we said, this is the Learn Lab for building a self-service internal developer platform. My name is Brian McClain. I'm an education engineer at HashiCorp. And before I get into anything that I want to talk about today, I want to bring up this slide. If you're going to be following along with us today, which we not only welcome, but we encourage, there's a few things you'll need. On the left side here is a link to a written version of everything we're going to be doing today. So every single step that we're going to be doing, there's links to a couple GitHub repos, a couple of bits of data to copy. That's probably a little bit easier than typing it out. If you want to go through this on your own time, this tutorial will stay up. You can reference this at any time. So bring it up on your phone, bring it up on your laptop, bookmark it, save it for later. If you are joining us in running through this today, there's a few things you'll need. You'll need an AWS key pair. So we're going to deploy a couple things into AWS. You need a HashiCorp Cloud Platform account. Just a free account is fine. So if you don't have one, you can go sign up. And you'll need a HTTP Terraform Plus account. Now, if you don't have a Plus account, we're going to try something we haven't done at a HashiConf before. This link on the bottom, hashi.co/idp-org. You can go to that link, and it will send you to a sign-up form. And once I'm done going through some slides, we're going to run a script, hopefully invite whoever needs an invite to that org, and you'll be able to follow along there. If you're using your own HTTP Terraform account, you also need a GitHub account that's set up as a VCS provider. If you don't have that set up in that written version of our lab today, it'll have a link to the documentation on how to do it. It's only a few steps. It shouldn't take too long. So I'll leave this up while I talk about the agenda of what we're going to be doing today. So first, I want to talk a couple hypotheticals, I guess. We're going to talk about an organization. They're deploying their first couple applications. And what are the challenges that they're facing as they go from those small handful of apps to a couple dozen to a couple hundred. From there, I want to talk about what do I mean when I say internal developer platform, where does it fit in that conversation, and how can it help with those issues? And then finally, not to spoil the lab too much, but we're going to talk about HTTP Waypoint today. So how it works, where it fits in that conversation. We're going to find some of the terminology that we use there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into it, and we're going to talk about that example organization. So we're ready to deploy to production. We're ready for users. A question you should probably ask before now, but we're going to ask now, which is, how do we do it, right? Because it is kind of deceivingly complex. We need to test and build our code, so we need a CI/CD pipeline. We need infrastructure to deploy to. We've landed on using Terraform, so we'll write some Terraform code. We need to figure out, is it in a cloud provider or on our in our data center? We need to figure out how to monitor it. Is it on Kubernetes? Is it how are we connecting to services? And suddenly, for one single team, this has gotten very, very, very complex. And what we see is, as you go towards production, there is this kind of ballooning of tooling and knowledge needed to run a productionized workload. So we say, OK, if this is too much for one team, we'll make a second team. We'll call them the platform team. And they'll be responsible for all the infrastructure. They'll deploy it, they'll patch it, and the app team can focus on applications. And this is already a lot better, right? As an app team, I can raise a ticket. I can say, hey, I'm making a new Java app. I need a Postgres database. I need to monitor it. And the platform team will handle that ticket. And honestly, for a few dozen applications, this probably works pretty well depending on the size of your teams. But as you start growing and you get towards those 50, 100, hundreds of applications, that little bit of friction becomes more and more noticeable, right? So if I'm waiting on a ticket to be triaged, if that goes from a couple hours to a couple days to a week, well, maybe speaking from my own experience, but what an app team is going to do is they're not going to wait around for that. They're going to go out, they're going to write their own, they're going to build their own servers, and then when they're ready to go to production, they're going to share it with the platform team and say, hey, good luck, this is ready to go. There's a lot of places we can go from here, but in this situation, the platform team's going to say, OK, we're going to automate this. We're going to put together a nice little web portal. People can go in and choose whatever services they need, and it'll kick off this automation. And this is actually a big jump forward, right? Because for the application team, we're talking about velocity. I don't have to wait hours or days or weeks for that one server I need. We're talking minutes, potentially. And the incentive to build my own server, to kind of do that shadow IT, as people refer to it, that incentive is way, way, way lower. And for the platform team, it's about consistency. And to me, when you're talking infrastructure at scale, consistency is everything, right? If I know how to patch one Postgres server and it's the same as 100 other servers, well, I can patch those just as easily. Now, I've talked a lot about hypotheticals and theory here. The next question is, where does an internal developer platform fit in here? And really, you might be able to guess where the answer is right there. Because at the very basic level, at the most kind of highest of high levels, what we're talking about is an internal developer platform. We're capturing these golden patterns and these golden actions that make up a standard application in our org, and we're making them really easy to consume and deploy. I want to pause there real quick and define a couple of those terms I just used. So I talked about golden patterns and golden actions. So when I say golden patterns, what I mean is, what does a Java application look like? What does a Python application look like? How are we logging and monitoring? How are we building the services and connecting to them? All of those decisions that go into what make up a standard application in your org. When I say golden actions, I'm talking about those day two operations needed to continually maintain your apps. So I've deployed a new version to production and something went wrong, so I need a rollback. Or I need to clear cache or perform an off-schedule database backup. The last question I want to answer is, where does Waypoint fit in? And you can probably guess the answer here, which is the exact same place. Because really, Waypoint's goal is to capture those golden patterns and those golden actions and provide that interface between your application team and your platform team. So your platform team can continue to focus on maintaining that infrastructure, your application team can focus on your applications. Before we dive into Waypoint, I want to talk a little bit about how it works and define a couple of the terms for it. And more than anything, what I want to focus on is how Waypoint is so strongly integrated with HCP Terraform. So when I deploy something in Waypoint, it's going to go out, it's going to create a workspace, it's going to deploy a module, set up variables, everything that your platform team is used to doing today. These are the same technologies, you're using the same modules you're using today, but you're providing that very user-friendly interface to your application teams. To help define the terms, we're going to talk about a concrete example. This is actually what we're going to deploy in the demo today. And we're going to make a browser-based brick stacking game. It's really cool. These bricks, they fall from the sky. You can rotate them. You get a line across, they disappear. And I think we've decided to call it Terramino. So for that, if we're going to make a browser-based game, we need a web server. This will just be, in our case, a single EC2 instance. It'll be running our application and responding to web requests. We also want to persist some data, so we're going to spin up a Redis server. This will be on a separate EC2 instance, and we also need a way to provide the credentials from that Redis server to our web server in a secure way. So for this demo, we're going to use HTTP Vault Secrets. If you're not familiar with Vault Secrets, not a big deal. I actually wasn't before this putting this lab together, so I just thought it was a really cool way of addressing the need of providing the credentials between these two services. And we'll see how it works when we get to that point. To put this in terms of Waypoint, what we're going to do is we're going to actually write two Terraform modules. We're going to create one module for the web server, and then we'll create a second module for the Redis server and the process of writing those credentials to Vault Secrets. The reason for this is we're probably not the only application that's going to need a Redis server in the future, so we want to write something that's reusable, something that other applications can use in the future. On the Waypoint side, for the web server, we're going to create what's called a template. And what a template does is it points to a module in our registry and gathers some metadata around it. So things like information about the variables, any specific instructions for developers using it. You can put tags and labels on it so you can easily find it in your list of templates. And for the Redis server, we're going to create something that's a little bit different called an add-on. The difference here is add-ons, while they still point to a module in your registry and collect that similar metadata, is they're not really intended to be deployed standalone. They're really meant to be deployed alongside a template, things that you can reuse and kind of use as building blocks on top of your other applications. These two things here make up that golden pattern and golden action, or sorry, that golden pattern that I talked about earlier, but we also want to define a golden action. In Waypoint, these are very appropriately named actions. And what we're going to do is we're going to send a HTTP request to our running application. We've set up an API endpoint to where we can send a request and manually set the high score. So what Waypoint will do will actually craft and send that request for us. So before we dive into stuff, I'm going to try to set up this shared org that I talked about. Are there any questions that we have on what we've talked about so far? Keeping it easy on me, I appreciate it. Oh, perfect. I can also repeat the question if you don't want to. Sure. Yeah, no problem. So the question was, I mentioned that Waypoint points to modules in HTTP Terraform. Can it point to a stack? So right now, it's only deploying modules. I know I've been talking to a lot of people about Waypoint these last couple of days, so there's been a lot of feedback on potential growth that we can do with Waypoint. So I'm actually going to talk to the team right after this talk with all the feedback that we get, and I'll let them know that there's some interest around that. Any other questions? Cool. So let me run this script real quick. I don't mean to look too surprised, but it didn't error, so that's a good start. If you signed up for that shared org, you should have received an email just now or maybe in the next few seconds with instructions on how to join the shared organization. I did want to point out as we're going through this lab, if you're in that shared org, the steps will be a little bit different. I'll point those out along the way, but since you'll only have access to a single project, for example, you'll already have the modules uploaded and things like that. So I'll make sure I'm putting those out as we go. Okay, let's go ahead and actually swap over to the demo. And I have that written version of this tutorial up on my screen here. Like I said, this will stay up after HashiConf as well if you're interested. But I'm going to be referring to this for a few links and for a few bits of data that I'll be copying. So before we can get into creating those templates and creating those add-ons, there's a couple prerequisites that we'll need for our application and for Waypoint. So the first one I want to set up is I need to make sure my application can communicate with HTTP Vault secrets. It's going to do this by using the HTTP API. And to do that, I need to create a service principal with a key pair. So this is similar to in AWS. If you generate a key pair to interact with that API, same thing on HTTP. So I'm in HTTP right now. And I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to go to access control. I'll choose service principals and create a new service principal. And again, since this is going to be for our Terramino application to communicate with Vault Secrets, we'll name this Terramino HVS for Vault Secrets. We want to make sure we only give this the scope that we need, so it only needs to be able to read and write to vault secrets. So for our service, we'll choose secrets. And the role, we'll choose app manager. This is that read and write role rather than just read. I'll create that service principal. And then we'll generate a key pair for our application to use. So I'll choose keys, generate key, and I'll leave this tab open. We'll refer to this, so you might also want to copy this down, or you can leave this tab open. Great. On the Terraform side, we need a way for Waypoint to communicate with HTTP Terraform, and we need a place to deploy all of our resources. So we're going to create a team, we're going to create a project, and we're going to use a team token to give to Waypoint. If you're in the shared org, this is already set up for you, so you can hang tight. But if you're using your own org or just want to see how I've set this up, we'll first create the team by going to Settings, Teams, and Create a Team. I'll name this team Waypoint. And just to practice good security, we want to make sure this team will only have access to what we need it to have access to. So we're going to actually leave the default organization permissions of basically having no permissions in the org. We'll actually give it to, access to a project here in a moment. So the next thing is we need a project to deploy our resources to. So let me go back to the overview page and go to projects. I'll click New Projects, and I'll also name this Waypoint. We'll also give that team that we just created access to this project. So I'll go to my project settings, go to Team Access and Add Team, and we'll choose that Waypoint team we just created. In our documentation, we have all the very fine-grained specific permissions that this token will need. Just to keep it easy to follow along, I'm just going to choose the maintain permission group. This gives us all the permissions we need, plus a couple extra. If you're curious on what those are, it's these ones down here around downloading Sentinel mocks and managing run tasks. We don't need those for Waypoint, but we'll just keep this simple for the demo. So I'll click Assign Permissions, and now that Waypoint team has access to the project. One other thing we need to create, if you're not in the shared org, is we need to create a variable set with our AWS credentials. So another security recommendation we have when you're dealing with cloud credentials is that you actually manage those in a variable set and then apply those to a workspace or a project. And then that way, the management of those variables is separate from the management of the workspace. To do that, still in HTTP Terraform, I'm going to go back to my overview page and go to Settings. I'll go to Variable Sets. Little disclosure, I already have this created just so you don't have to see me copy and paste my credentials. But to create that variable set, I just go to Create Variable Set. And I'll name this Waypoints AWS. And I'll want to give this, I'll want to apply this to the project that we just created. So under Apply to Projects, I'll choose Waypoint. And then this is where I'll add my variables. Very important, make sure you're choosing these as environment variables. And we will create the AWS Access Key ID. Since I'm not creating this, we'll just say ABC 1, 2, 3. That's probably secure. And then same thing for the secret key. So AWS Secrets Access Key. Same thing, make sure you're choosing environment variable and put in your key. Make sure you click Add Variable to save that, and then you'll click Create Variable Set. Again, since I already have my variable set, I'm actually just going to go into that existing one, and same thing, apply that to that Waypoint project we just created, and save. Great. So this next step, if you're in the shared org, this is one you'll have to follow. We need to create a team token that will provide to Waypoint so that Waypoint can communicate with HTTP Terraform. So I'm going to still in my settings page, I'm going to go to API tokens under security. I'll choose team tokens, and I will create a team token. I'll choose that Waypoint team we just created, and we'll just leave the default expiration of 30 days. And make sure I copy that. To configure Waypoint, we'll go back into HCP. I'll have to regenerate that, not a big deal. And from your HCP overview page, you can choose Waypoint on the left here. You can see I've had this set up at one point, so I'm getting an error at the top, but your page should look more like that, I suppose. We'll paste the token we just generated, and then Waypoint will reach out to HCP Terraform to get a list of all the organizations it has access to. In this case, it will just have access to the one org, the org that we created the team in, so we'll just leave that. And we can click Activate. Definitely don't want to save that as a password. Great, so now Waypoint can officially talk to Terraform. Cool, so we have all of our prerequisites now. We can actually start creating the template, creating our add-ons. Again, if you're in the shared org, you should already have the module in the private registry. So this step only follow if you're in your own organization. If you're following along in the written version of this guide, I'm at this step here. I'm creating the Terramino Waypoint template. And what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to go to this repository. And I'm going to fork this into my own GitHub org. So I'll choose Use this template, create a new repository, choose me as an owner, and we'll name it Terraform AWS Terramino. Just the same as the template org. Did I type that right? I did type that. All right. We'll leave everything else as default and click Create Repository. This will just take a moment. But what this repository is doing is setting up the EC2 instance, setting up all the networking required for it, and then it's going to run a boot script, which we can actually take a look at here, on the EC2 instance once it's up and running. So if you're familiar with AWS Provider, we've created the EC2 instance using the user data field, passing it this script. And all we're doing here is we're installing Go, we're cloning the application code, and then we're running it. Again, a little bit demo hand wavy. We'd probably recommend you use something like Packer to build this into an image, but we want to keep things as simple as we could today. On the Terraform side, we'll publish this as a module. So I'll go back to my overview and go to registry. I'll click Publish Module, choose my GitHub org. And it should be the first one since it was just the most recently created repo. Just to keep the steps as small as we can, I'll choose branch-based publishing from the main branch, and we'll give a version of 1.0.0. Very important, make sure that you choose the add module to no code provisioning allow list. This is what will let Waypoint deploy this automatically. So this is using no code modules if you're familiar with those. If you're not familiar with no code modules, we have some awesome tutorials to walk through how to create them. The structure is essentially the same with a couple additions, namely around provider configuration. So we'll publish this, and it should take just a moment. Great. So we have our module. A couple of things I want to point out here is there are a few inputs that this module requires. It'll take in information about HCP. This is going to what's ultimately provided to the application. So again, that client ID and client secret we generated earlier, the HCP org and HCP project. This Waypoint application variable is actually something that will be populated by Waypoint. This is actually a really handy way in your Terraform configuration for the module to refer to the name of the deployed application. And we'll actually see where that comes into play here in just a moment. On the Waypoint side, we can create our template now. So I'm going to go to Templates and create a template. I'll name this template Terraform, since that's what we're deploying, and we'll give it a summary, a brick stacking game. We'll choose our Terraform module that we just uploaded, and it will ask us if we have a specific project that we want to deploy to. In this case, again, we only have access to the one project that we've given that team token access to, so we'll just leave it as Waypoint. And then we need to configure information about those input variables. You might notice these checkboxes here that say enable this value to be defined when the application is created. You can defer supplying this information and let users supply this when they deploy it. So for example, if you want them to be able to choose a certain size of a database or something along those lines, you can let them choose that when they deploy this template. To keep it easy on our users, I'm just going to supply all this information. And if you give me one moment, since I accidentally closed out of that screen, I'll generate a new key pair real quick. Great. So I have my client ID. I have my client secret. And then to get the org and project ID, there's a really handy way to do this. If I go back to my HTTP overview and go into my project settings, we can see our project ID here. So we'll copy that. And even more helpful is it will ask us, are we looking for our org ID? And which, yes, we are, so thank you. So we'll click that and grab our org ID. Click next, and then we need to collect a little bit more information to provide to the developers that are using this template, a description and any developer instructions. So again, we'll just give it a little bit more technical of a description of a single EC2 instance running Terraform. We don't really have any developer instructions, so we'll leave that blank for now. And then here we can give it some labels to make it a little bit easier to find in a big catalog of templates. So it's on AWS, it's Terraform, it's a web app. That sounds good to me. And we'll click Publish. So we have our template, it's ready to go. And we can go ahead and create an application from it. So we'll click Create Application, choose our Terraform app. And since we defined values for all of those input variables earlier, all we need to do is give it a name. So we'll name this Terraform app and click Create. So like I said earlier, what's going to happen now is Waypoint is reaching out to HTTP Terraform. It's creating a workspace. It's populating it with all those variables that we've defined, all the ones shown on the side here. It's deploying that Terraform module that we just published. And we can actually, if we see here on the bottom right side, it will link us out to the workspace that is running this apply. So this should only take a few moments. While this is going, I'll show you the Terraform code, since this will take about a minute to spin up. There's a lot of Terraform files here. This is for the module that we just published. The main one here is what's actually creating our AWS instance. So it's using that user data field and using the boot.sh file as a template. And we can see here we're actually feeding it the same client ID, client secret, org and project ID. And for the app name, we're pulling that Waypoint application variable that Waypoint is populating. In the boot file, we can see that we're setting these values as environment variables. So this is how we're authenticating to Vault Secrets. And then the app name is used as an environment variable for the application. So it's used in the code that we'll see here in a little bit. Let's check in on this apply and see if I've stalled long enough. Great, so the apply finished. The real question is, did that user script finish? So if we see a connection failed here, that's actually not the worst thing in the world, which we did. So what's happening now is it's going through, it's running that boot script. It'll take another maybe 30 seconds or so. We'll take a brief pause here while this continues running. Are there any questions of what we've seen so far? I know I've been kind of showing a lot of steps all at once. So yeah. I can repeat the question, it's no big deal.
When you're passing in the parameters to create the application for the template, is there a specific way, like metadata about the fact that this user initiated the request that could get put into tags, like on the infrastructure? It's like if you need the tag, like the owner.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so the nice thing here is at the end of the day, it is just a Terraform module, and these are the input variables like we would define today. So if that is something you want to define on the template side, actually I'll show you, where these variables are being created in the code. If I can find the tab, I got way too many tabs open. Right. Yeah, so these, you can see we're just applying these as we would in a normal Terraform module today. So you could have it a variable to take in like information about tags that you can use in the module to like tag instances or however you need to use them. Did I understand your question?
Yeah, it looks like you can input things, like type it in what you want, but like the user's running that deployment, and I know the user based on I'm the user running the workflow. So like, how do I know what user clicked and ran that workload, and how would I get that into like the infrastructure tags? Is there a way to do that?
I don't think there is. I'm looking at Julie because she would know if I don't. Yeah, I don't think there is today. Again, we're definitely kind of collecting a lot of feedback on Waypoint today, so that's actually a really good point. So we'll definitely let the team know.
Okay. I had another question, more basic, but on you had a visual of the template, the actions, the modules. Since all those things kind of run together, and then you get your application to pop up, where do you expect like a health check before the user knows that their application's live is written?
Yeah.
Is it in the Terraform module? Is it like somewhere in Waypoint?
Yeah, so there's a couple places, and actually this deployment of this application is a good example because we saw the infrastructure was up, but the application wasn't up. From the infrastructure side, you have the same access to anything you do from HTTP Terraform, so things like health checks or check blocks. As far as if the application is up and running, I don't know that I have a good answer right now. I know I haven't been very helpful in these Q&As, so I apologize. But yeah, another great point of like, if there's specific health checks that we can make for the application. I'm thinking through some like very convoluted answers of like, well, you could create a check block in Terraform that would check for the HTTP request to come back, and it's not done applying until that check's done, or something like that. I think there's maybe potential for a more user-friendly approach to that, though.
Hey, Brian, can you refresh the QR code? Just show the QR code again.
For the, I actually can. I was going to say I'd have to bring the slides back up, but I think it should be that. That should be the written version of the lab we're going through today. Perfect. It's handy I had that on my desktop. Cool. So we can see we have our generic brick stacking game running. That's definitely called Terramino. But if I play around and game over, we can see I get a score of 120 here. This is that current high score. But if we refresh, it's not persisted because we have nothing to persist it to. We haven't deployed that Redis server yet. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the add-on to deploy that Redis server. Again, in that shared org, this module is already uploaded, so you don't have to worry about this step. But in the written guide, same thing is there will be another link to a GitHub repository. And I'll say, use this template to create a new repository. We'll name this Terraform AWS Redis EC2. And click Create. On the Terraform side, I'll go back into my registry and publish this module. You can see that repository we just created. And same thing, we'll use branch-based publishing off the main branch, and we'll name it version 1.0.0. And we'll add the module to the no-code provisioning allow list. And click Publish. Give it just a moment to finish processing. Great. So now that this is in our registry, on Waypoint, we can go back to our overview page and go to add-ons. We'll create a new add-on. And this screen is going to look very similar. It's collecting a lot of the same information. The biggest difference here is how it's used in Waypoint. So we'll name this, if I can type, Redis dedicated, a dedicated Redis instance. We'll choose the module we just created. And then we have the option here, if we want to just deploy it to the same the same project that the application's been deployed to, we can keep this toggle checked. We can choose to deploy to a different project if we want. In our case, we only have access to one project, so we'll just leave it to deploy to the same project. And again, we're going to have some input variables here. I'm going to cheat a little bit and open up our application that we just deployed. And I'm going to copy this information. So our client ID, our client secret, and we just need the project ID for this one. We'll give it a description, so a single Redis. If I can spell Redis, R-E-D-I-S, thank you. Server running in an EC2 instance. Now, I actually want to pause here on the developer instructions because this is a case where there are some specific instructions for our devs. We talked about how this module will write the connection information to Vault Secrets. So we need to tell our developers about that. So what we'll say is credentials written to the application name namespace in HVS. Now I'm using one of the provided variables from Waypoint here. There's a couple more examples that are shown on this screen, but in our documentation, we actually list out all of those potential variables. So things around what's the application name, what's the name of the module that it's using, what's the name that you've given to this particular add-on. So it makes it really easy to put that information and make it available into these descriptions. We'll give it some labels as well. So we'll say Redis, AWS, dedicated, sure, that looks good. And we'll publish it. So now we're ready to install this add-on into our running application. So we'll go back into our app. And we'll go to add-ons. And we can see now we have an available add-on, that Redis dedicated add-on we just created. And I'll just click install. Now, this is where I want to take a moment to kind of talk about everything about that's been deployed, where it's been deployed, because what's happening here is we're creating a new workspace. We're doing that same process of setting the variables and deploying this module. I'll open this up in HCP Terraform as well. And we can see it's going through the plan. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go show you our Waypoint project. Because we can see here we have two workspaces now. This is our Terraform app that we deployed earlier, the web application that's running. And we have a new workspace named Terraform app, so the name of the application, Redis dedicated, the name of the add-on, and then a random string. So these workspaces live right next to each other in HCP Terraform. There's one other variable that's made available to us here. So we still have that Waypoint application name made available to us, so we know the name of the application that this add-on is being deployed to. We also have the name of the add-on and the name of the add-on definition. So if you need that information when you're writing the module, in this case, we know that we want to use that Waypoint application variable to write our secrets to vault secrets. I'll show you where that's happening in the code, just to kind of show it end to end. This one, no. This one, all right. Tab management is a problem for everyone. So we have this HVS file here. And this is where we're creating what's called an app in Vault Secrets. An app is basically just a collection of secrets. And then we're creating 3 secrets. We're creating the Redis IP, the port, and the password. On the Vault Secrets side, looks like this finished applying, so we can go see where that looks like on what that looks like in Vault Secrets. And we can see we created an app here as well named Terraform app. And in there we have those same 3 secrets, the IP, the port, and the password. These are just using the standard key value storage in Vault Secrets, so nothing too fancy going on here. If you are interested in Vault Secrets, there's a lot of great tutorials on developer.hashicorp.com, by the way. There's a lot of integrations that you can use. It's a pretty powerful tool. So I'd recommend checking that out. So we'll see if I've stalled enough again, and we'll refresh. Great. So we have this tiny little debug screen here. Amongst other information, we can see we have the Redis information that we just saw there. And then it sent a ping to the server, and it looks like we're connected now. So if I play a full round of this, not very good at the game, and now I refresh, we can see now that our high score is being persisted. So kind of to bring it full circle, what the application is doing is polling Vault Secrets, looking for that IP, that port, that password, and if that exists, it's writing that information to Redis. Cool. So we got one more thing to show off on the demo, and that is the action part of things. So we've shown off kind of that golden pattern. What does this type of application look like? For the action, we want to create an action that will set the high score manually. We want the developers to be able to manage that. So I'm going to go back into Waypoint, go to the overview page, and go to my actions, and we'll create a new action. We'll name it set high score, manually set the high score. We want the application team to be able to provide a value for this, so we're going to create a variable here called score. And I'm going to click this checkbox here named enable this value to be defined when the action is triggered. So we can set this to be a static value if we want. In this case, it will prompt the user when they run the action. And we can see now this asks for a default value rather than just a value. We'll give it a default of 0. For action type, we're going to use the custom action. Custom actions are essentially sending those HTTP requests. You can see there's an agent action type. These are pretty powerful. So you're literally running an agent in your own infrastructure. It's watching for those actions to be called, and you can run essentially anything you can capture as code. You can kick off a script. You can kick off a binary that you built. There's a lot of flexibility that you have with agent types. To keep it simple, though, we'll just stick with a custom action type. And then it needs some information about the request I want to send. So I know I wrote the API endpoint to accept a put request. And this is another case we're going to use a variable. Just to make sure I get this right, I'm going to copy this. So we can see in this $ curly brackets, we're referencing application.outputs.hostname. This is an output from that module that we deployed. So the same one that we copied to get to our application. And then we're adding /score to it, which is our API endpoint. I need to define a header for my particular application. So we'll set that to content type and give it this value. And then finally, for the body, we want to send it that score variable that we just created. So again, just to make sure I don't mess anything up here, I'm going to copy it. And it's the same syntax of $ curly brackets var dot score, so score being the variable name. Let's create this action. And finally, we need to assign this action to either a template or an application. When you assign it to a template, any application that's created from it will automatically have this action assigned to it. In this case, our application is already deployed, so we'll just assign it directly to the application. So I'll click Assignments, go to Applications, Manage, and Edit Assignments. And we can see our Terraform app here. I'll check that and hit Confirm. It'll just prompt us to make sure we're sure on what we want to do. Click Apply. And if we go into our application, we can see we have a brand new shiny Actions dropdown with our action in it. So we'll run that real quick. We'll say set high score, and we're going to set it to something that I know I can't hit, something like that. We'll click run, and we can see that it ran the action. It will give us a little bit of detail around it too, so we can see it ran successfully. We can even dive into it a little bit. We got a 200 back, so everything's looking good. And if we go into our Terraform app and refresh, we can see that we set the score to that value that we just set it to. So just one example of an action, but I really do think that these are pretty flexible tools to kind of help enhance the development team's use of Waypoint. So anything you can capture in an HTTP request or with those agent types, you can capture as an action. So that actually concludes the demo of using Waypoint. I want to mention, especially in that shared org, one thing I'll suggest you do is to spin down all this infrastructure. Please. So if you go into your application and go to Manage, you can hit Delete Application, Confirm. And what's going to happen on the Terraform side is we can see that both workspaces are already going through and being destroyed. So it's destroying the app and the add-on. We'll also set this up to auto-destroy on any project in the shared org a little bit later today. So if you haven't cleaned up those resources, it will attempt to go through and clean them up. This org will be spun down later tonight, though, so I suggest while you have the time to clean this up now. So that concludes the demo. Hopefully this was educational. It showed off some of the very exciting, I think, features of Waypoint and how they can be used to build and be the building blocks for your internal developer platform. And I think I ended way early, so we have a lot of time for questions, if there are any. Just want to do it again? All right. But yeah, any questions? Yeah.
Could you speak to the relationship to, let's say, stacks, projects, and what else?
You asked the question again in the mic, so we
Yeah.
can catch it on the video.
Hello. Yes.
Perfect.
Could you speak to the planned relationship between environments, stacks, projects, and so on, other constructs?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything I can actually talk to with plans regards to stacks. So we did GA Waypoint today. So this is kind of our first outing of some of the features that we want to show off. It does sound like there's a lot of interest on talking about stacks with the Waypoint, though. So I think Julie and I will talk with the team probably tonight and let them know, though. Sorry, I don't have a better answer, but.
So I'm trying to understand. So in terms of like thinking ahead, so this I like the idea that you can set up a Java application, but then is this like you are now thinking in terms of there is going to be a need for a database, and there is going to be a need for an S3 bucket, and then there is going to be a need for a cache, and then there is going to be a need for an SQS environment. So is it like you have to understand an application architecture completely across your organization, across multiple teams? And does it limit the developers' innovation because platform engineering is limiting them?
So
And again, I will tell you some background because
Sure.
I've been an application developer for 20 years and a platform engineering manager for 5. So I'm going to side through the developer than
sure.
the platform engineer.
For sure.
So again, I'm just trying to understand, does it limit the developers' innovative capabilities because I'm only getting 7 constructs and AWS is releasing 50 services every year?
Yeah, so that's a very fair question. I think really the first thing I'd point out is even as you adopt something like an internal development platform, or as you adopt something like Waypoint, I don't think that communication between the app team and the platform team ceases to exist. I think there's still constant communication around, hey, we're making this type of application, we're going to be using this technology that you don't support, so we need you to go out and build that module. I think, obviously every organization operates a little bit differently, but in this case, if the platform team would be responsible for managing that service or that database or the new AWS feature that they just released, I think they would tend to want to capture that as infrastructure as code today anyway. And that's why I think Waypoint being so integrated with Terraform is an important distinction, because these aren't new ways of operating if you're using Waypoint versus just applying Terraform from the command line. It's more just that interface to make it easy for the development team. So kind of a long-winded answer to say that it's still active communication every day with those two teams. I think it just kind of helps really simplify those day-to-day operations rather than be kind of the catch-all solution for everything that might be done in the future. Anything else? Cool. Well, I appreciate you all coming out. I know it was the last session of the day. If you're excited to call it a day, everyone's tired, so I'll let you take over.